Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this press conference. Lovely to see so many of you in the room. Also, a warm welcome to those who are following us on the live stream. My name is Janine Kendall. I work for UN Women and have the pleasure of kicking off today's press conference. We're going to be talking about gender and climate, what the two have to do with each other, and why we are pushing for gender-focused finance here at COP29. I have the pleasure to be on the panel with two exceptional women today. You have to my right Dr. Jemima Nyuki. She's the chief of the Economic Empowerment section at UN Women and also the head of UN Women's COP delegation. And then we are very fortunate to have with us today Aishika Najib. She's a member of the Feminist Action for Climate Justice Coalition under the Generation Equality Forum, which is hosted by UN Women. And she's a very powerful youth climate activist, and we look forward to hearing from her. I will now be welcoming the panelists to make their opening statements for roughly about 5 minutes each, and then we will open up to the media for questions. I would like to ask that we prioritize questions for the media because this is a press briefing. If you have a question, please raise your hand, identify yourself and the outlet you're working for. We're very happy to speak with you. Jemima, please kick us off.
Thank you very much, and happy Gender Day at COP29. As we all know, gender equality and excellent, I can see the excitement. As we all know, gender equality and climate change are closely interlinked. Every day we are seeing the impacts that climate change has on women and girls. We are seeing the impacts that climate change has on gender diverse groups, on indigenous peoples, and it is really important that we understand that we cannot achieve climate justice without gender justice, that these two have to go together. Let me first talk about the different impacts that we have seen that climate change has on women and girls. The first thing is when climate change happens, women and girls are having to look harder and longer for the resources that they need, for the resources that they survive on. I'll just give you an example. In sub-Saharan Africa, women and girls are spending 200 million hours per day looking for water. And as climate change intensifies, the distances that they have to go to get this water is getting longer and longer. Climate change is increasing incidences of gender-based violence. As families go hungry and they need food, we are seeing increases in early and forced marriage of young girls. We are seeing more food insecurity for women and girls. Our analysis shows, at the worst case scenario, 236 million women and girls are going to be food insecure by 2050. 158 million women and girls are going to fall into poverty. This is unacceptable. On the other hand, every day we are seeing women and girls at the forefront of climate action, whether it is indigenous women protecting their territories, protecting lands and trees in the Amazon, whether it's smallholder women farmers cultivating on land that they do not own, growing climate resilient crops so that they can feed the world. Whether it's women fisherfolk protecting mangrove ecosystems, every day women and girls are at the forefront of climate action. And yet, what do we see? Climate finance that is not fit for purpose. So as we discuss climate finance at this COP, it is very important, yes, that we agree on the quantity of finance that is needed to fight this crisis. Equally important is that we agree on the quality of that finance, that finance must be gender responsive, And what does it mean for that finance to be gender responsive? It means that finance must go to addressing the gender inequalities that we see. Currently, only 4% of adaptation ODA is going to gender equality as a principal objective. Only 2% of mitigation ODA is going to gender equality as a principal objective. Out of all the capital raised in 2022, 600 billion, only 20 billion went to gender equality. So we have to direct finance. If we are saying climate change has a different impact on women and girls, then we must see climate finance going to fighting those inequalities. We also must see finance going to grassroots organizations, to women, to indigenous people, to feminist movements, to youth organizations and youth-led organizations that are working every day to make the planet a livable planet for us all. So, gender-responsive climate finance that addresses gender equality and that goes where we need it to go. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Jemima. Aishika, take it away.
Thank you so much. 21st of November, officially the second last day of COP. So let me cut through the diplomacy and get straight into the point. This COP was meant to be as much as a gender COP as it is a finance COP. Yet what we're witnessing is not progress, but an alarming backslide on gender across agenda items. This regression isn't just disappointing, it threatens our very existence. And to be honest, we know that the gender was not a priority for the presidency. We have witnessed that at pre-COP. It has been from the tireless advocacy of feminists in this very halls, especially the Women and Gender constituency, that we were able to get the gender negotiations agenda picked up again in week 2. Because we were very clear, when we will not walk out of COP29 without an outcome on gender. And while we got a draft text today morning, references to intersectionality has been deleted. Although the text offers a 10-year roadmap and a work for the subsidiary bodies, it lacks ambition. And what we urgently need is for transformative, intersectional, adequately resourced, and measurable outcomes. And this is not what is happening in the dialogues in the negotiation rooms. On just transition, since day one, feminists, especially the Women and Gender constituency, have been vocal that we cannot have a just transition work program without reference to the care economy. And I want to share a good news that in today's text that was launched at 7 a.m., we finally get, for the first time, a reference to care economy and the informal sector. We need to understand that the care economy is the invisible foundation of this economy. Care work makes all of the other work possible. And when countries are hit by climate shocks, care workers are often the first to respond. And this work is disproportionately carried by women and girls. So I request everybody in this room, as you walk out, please hold the line. Hold the line to retain this text as we walk out of COP29. We know, we saw the headlines. Fossil fuel lobbyists at this COP outnumbered the delegations of the 10 most vulnerable countries. 1,773 to be exact. More than feminist organizations in this space. Their presence have severely undermined negotiation streams. Meanwhile, the violence they represent is not abstract. We know that fossil fuel extraction sites have been linked to gender-based violence, especially on indigenous women and girls. And now we're witnessing, under the banner of a just transition, the same violence is being normalized in the mining of so-called transitional minerals. We cannot accept this. We need to be honest with ourselves. We're spinning the wheels of the same systems of oppression and calling it a just transition. We need the texts to recognize free, prior, and informed consent. This is non-negotiable, so please hold the line on it. We must refuse a future where Black and brown bodies are treated as collateral damages in the name of climate action. And finally, the big picture on climate finance. The time for millions have passed. This is a joke if we go out there and advocate and call for millions. We've seen the adaptation gap report. We've seen the loss and damage needs. The finance goals is in trillions, and it must be provided in a gender-responsive manner. Without it, the rhetoric of justice and equity will remain hollow. This is why I would like to highlight paragraph 18 on the current NCQG text. This is the only paragraph with reference to human rights. We must absolutely defend this. And paragraph 44, this is the only paragraph which lists subnational groups with an aspect of human rights language in its core. So subnational groups such as indigenous peoples, local communities, women. This is how we can get finance to the community level. We need to be certain of this, that this is not a time to be hopeless, because to be hopeless is to be privileged. This is not just a climate crisis, this is a crisis of human rights, of justice and equity. And so as we leave this room, I request you, let's hold the line on gender, for justice, and for the principles that underpin our fight for a livable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jemima and Aishika. We'd now like to open the floor for questions from anyone in the audience. We'd give preference to media. If you raise your hand, please. Is anyone? Yes. Can we get a microphone? Wonderful. Please state your name and the outlet that you work for.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Shamim from Tanzania. I work with the Tanzania Ocean Climate Innovation Hub, and I was by the UN Ocean Decade working with coastal women. And I would like to ask a question to both Jemima and I would like to understand. I was speaking to some young girls in Sudan, and I asked them, what gives you hope? We are talking about war and climate change. And you know what they told me? What gives me hope as an 11-year-old girl is I just have to have hope. I have no choice but to have hope. So I would like to understand, how are you working with such girls in such conflicted areas? Because to them, their security is a priority than climate change itself. So how are you integrating such systems that they are able to feel safe and secure when we're even having conversations about climate change? With the fisher folks, how are you also ensuring that they also have a seat at the table? Because majority of them, when you talk to them, they're like, UN Women works with women in urban areas. They do not work with us as coastal women. So how are you making sure that you also put up the light for these women in coastal areas, but also in conflicted areas such as the forgotten war in Sudan? Thank you.
Thank you. We can take one or two more questions and answer them together. Please state your name and who you're affiliated with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies. My name is Taya Makhele. I come from Africa, in particular Lesotho. I work with the Ministry of Gender, Youth, and Social Development. My interest is gender issues should be cross-cutting issues. What are you going to do to ensure that gender issue is a cross-cutting issue? And most of our policies would normally say we leave nobody behind. And from all, I think I would I want to generalize and say all cultures, women have always played part in the economic, in the social issues. But the development now, as we speak, they say women have to play economic issues. That's the first one. The second question that I want is, in my country, those that are marginalized mostly now are boys because they become shepherds. I was sharing the breakfast with one colleague from England this morning, and I asked him, who are the marginalized group? He said, white boys. When are we going to ensure that issues of groups that are marginalized are affected? Even the boys, where is boys, girls, where is boys, girls, women, where is women. So, and that will make it, or apply the gender concept, irrespective of which sex. Thank you.
We'll take one more. If I can ask the colleagues just to make the questions precise. We have about 11 more minutes here, and I want to give the panel a chance to answer. So please keep the questions brief, and we'll close this first round after this question.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll be very direct to my question. Good morning. My name is Balki Salaudin. I'm from Nigeria, and I'm a farmer. I'm always intrigued when we have conversations around gender finance, and we see the role that women play, especially in rural communities, where currently large number of farmers in Africa are women. But very, very small percentage of these women have access to their own land, which means that whatever investment is being made on their land, anybody can come from nowhere and push them away from that land. So we've seen that there are no land right for women in the agricultural sector. We've also seen that whenever we talk about finance at the national level, not at global level like this, we don't hear gender. It's only at the UN system that you hear gender. So when can we start domesticating, because the UN woman is present in all of the countries. So when can the UN women start pushing with the Ministry of Finance in each of these countries, with the government, to ensure that there is a touch of gender in their intersection, in their work, in the finance approach that they're doing, so that by the time finance is coming to the country, they're not just prioritizing big industries, but they're prioritizing the most marginalized, which I would say women farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. Jemima Ejika, you want to start, Jemima, and then we hand over?
Yes, thank you so much for those questions. So let me tackle one at a time. First, climate change is affecting women in all their diversity. We are seeing climate change affect rural women and girls in terms of their access to energy, their access to water. We are seeing climate change affect girls and women living in urban areas as well, as they struggle to make provisions for their families. And UN Women works with women across all their diversity. We have over 70 country offices around the world. We are working on programs on rural women's economic empowerment. We are working on programs to actually get girls into even climate science and technology sciences and STEM education, because the other thing we've seen is the low representation of women in spaces where women need to be. When you look at women in leadership, less than 30% of environmental ministers are women, and yet we know that climate action is more effective, is more inclusive when we have women in leadership. And so building women's leadership is critical to effective climate action. We see gender equality also affected by crisis. There is a very strong connection between climate, security, and gender equality. In countries where there is conflicts, a lot of those conflicts are driven by the fight for natural resources. And so our agenda is to make sure that we are supporting women and girls, including in climate crisis, that humanitarian action is gender responsive. We are coordinating gender equality within the humanitarian sector. We are in Sudan, we are in South Sudan, we are in Palestine, all over the world where there is a crisis, including in Afghanistan. UN Women is there, ensuring that women and girls are not left behind. Gender equality is a cross-cutting issue. We, even here at COP29, we are integrating gender across all the work streams. In the just transition, estimates show that 80% of the jobs that are going to be created within the just transition are going to be in male-dominated sectors if we do not become intentional about gender equality. And therefore, it's not just about a just transition, it is about a gender-just transition and making sure that women are represented in that just transition, that the care economy is part of that just transition, because we see more and more, most women working in the paid care sector, a huge gender pay gap. We have a 20% gender pay gap across the world in paid care, and we want to close that gender gap. Whether it is in the energy transition, we want women to be leaders and to participate in that energy transition. And more importantly, we want a just transition that does not leave anyone behind. For rural women, land rights are critical. Rural women continue to cultivate on land that they do not own, land that they do not control. They have it this season. They do not know whether they will have it the next season. And yet the evidence shows us where women have rights to land, that we actually have better climate resilience because they are able to adopt climate resilient technologies. And so part of our work at UN Women is to ensure that their women have secure rights to land, but we can also guarantee those rights through legal frameworks, but also through addressing the social and harmful norms that we know influence whether women can or cannot own land. And finally, to the issue of climate finance. One of the best ways that we do with governments to ensure allocation of resources to gender equality is through gender-responsive budgeting, because it is one thing to say we need gender-responsive finance, but how do we make that a reality? So as UN Women, we work in over 80 countries supporting governments to adopt gender-responsive budgeting tools so that there is resources being allocated to gender equality across public spending. Thank you.
Would you like to add some thoughts, Aishka?
I don't have much to add, plus to everything Dr. Jemima has shared. But I want to specify that when we talk about the implementations of the Gender Action Plan, the implementation of the Lima Work Program, and the implementation of the Just Transition Work Program, where do we come in the picture? Especially as feminist organizations, movements, women's rights caucuses, where do we come in the picture? And right now, in none of those texts do we have a space, a seat at the table. And I really want to stress on that. Justice will come from the movements. not from these texts that are agreed in these halls. So it's very important for us to ensure that we also fight for a seat at the table for the observer constituencies and for those organizations that are actually doing the work on the ground. And this is a hard push across agenda items, especially in the implementation of the Gender Action Plan, to collaborate, to mobilize and work together with the organization, feminist organizations on the ground. I just wanted to add that point.
Thank you. We've run almost out of time. Are there any other pressing questions? Otherwise, our panelists will be available for interviews or just a nice conversation right outside the press briefing room. Are there any other short questions from members of the media? Please keep it to 1 minute so that we have a chance to answer this. We want to be respectful of
sorry, I'm not a media. I'm a government person. I'm a national focal point of Nepal to UNFCCC. Just one thing, it's not a query but a suggestion, because what I'm facing is, it's particularly the climate finance mechanisms. They do, like GCF, GF, they do have gender action plans. But unfortunately, they do not allocate, they do not earmark any budget to implement gender action plan or social safeguard plan. So I think this is an area where UN women can lobby to earmark, to implement. They leave gender action plan to the government, recipient government to implement, which is another challenging situation. Someone told, Ministry of Finance would not be able to. So this is one area that I would like to raise, request UN Women to lobby. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll say we continue to try our best. I would like the panelists to each give a closing statement, and then I'm sure they're available and happy to continue these conversations as we move beyond this press briefing. Jemima, any closing remarks?
We know that gender equality has enormous dividends for the world, for our economies, and for the planet. We need to be very, very intentional about it, because we know we cannot achieve climate action. We cannot achieve the world that we want if we are leaving half of the world behind. And so my key ask is this: whichever spaces we are in, that we make sure that gender equality is a priority.
Thank you. Nice.
I just want to say that from these days that we have left ahead of us, we have so much to gain, especially from recognizing and centering the diversity of our lived realities, how we experience the climate impacts, and what the solutions are for thriving local and renewable economies. We have so much to lose, on the other hand, if we fail to do so. So our push for an understanding of intersectionality, of gender, is for getting us closer to the reality of impacts, the reality of power, who has it, who needs it, and a push for a path towards just transition, where a shift away from fossil fuel-based economies are a true shift away from harmful extraction, patriarchal-driven processes, and not just an entrenchment of existing injustices, inequalities, and discriminations. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our panel. Thank you to everyone in the room for coming today and supporting us in our continuous ask for gender equality in the climate action debate. Thank you.